and Dr. Robertson has asked me to come in to do social psychology. It's really one of my favorite areas. It's really interesting, and so before we get started, I want to make sure that everyone has made a guess as the number of candies that are in here. If you have not, come up here and do that, and then I'm going to pass out a little sheet of paper for you to do something for me.
You did this in one of my groups.
I did. Okay, did everybody get a sheet of paper? Okay. What I want you to do is write your name, your address, and your phone number on this sheet. Is it almost everybody here? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, while y'all are doing that, I'm going to go ahead and get started so that I can try to get through most everything. But how many of y'all have taken social psychology? Okay, so about half of you in here. All right, and so, excuse me, tongue time. Social psychology is basically looking at thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of others. And then they do social experiments and certain types of research that is associated specifically with these types of issues. So the first thing that I want to talk about is social influence. And this is basically looking at the real or imagined presence of another person. And so how do you think that this could actually influence another person if I was looking at the real or imagined aspect of another person or persons? How would that influence me? Can somebody give me an example? Yes.
When I guess when we're going through adolescence and we have the imagined audience that everyone's staring at us.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. What else, Lindsay?
Bystander effect, because everyone's around, you think that someone's going to stop and help them, so you think that you don't need to.
Okay. Yeah, so it doesn't even matter if someone is actually there watching us. It can be just the idea that someone could potentially see what we were doing. So basically what has happened with this is we can have a person who is doing a certain behavior or acting a certain way because they feel like someone might notice them. So let me give you an example. In my very first social psych class, I had a student that came up to me and he said, "Oh my gosh, I do this all the time." He said that his parents used to say, "Now, if you're going to go off to college, you need to remember that we will know what's going on with you, because you also need to think about, like, what would Jesus see you doing?" And he said that he kept on thinking, "Oh my goodness, everything I do is going to be watched by my parents and by Jesus." And so he said that this was something that played a big part in his life. But it doesn't even have to be something like that. How many of y'all have ever thought, "Oh, I can't do this behavior in front of somebody else, but I also think about it whenever I'm in my room alone or I'm in an area where there's not very many people around"? Y'all probably thought about something like that. So, conformity is changing one's own behavior to match that of other people. So, what are some situations that we conform typically?
College.
College? Like what?
I don't know.
Waiting in line.
Waiting in line, exactly. So how many of y'all have ever seen a line open at the airport and you see someone standing here taking the tickets and everyone else is in this particular line, and so you go get in that line? Has anybody ever noticed that there is a line sometimes that's open right beside of them and nobody goes into that particular line? It happens all the time. In fact, I've seen it over and over and over at the airport. And then someone will eventually say, come on over here, come get in this line. Why do we do that? Because everyone else is in that line and we think that this other line is closed. So what other kinds of things can fall into conformity?
The way we dress.
The way we dress, especially as adolescents. We dress a certain way, we wear certain things because of conformity a lot of times. But not everybody conforms. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little video over the dangers of conformity. And if you've been in my social psych class, then you've seen this before. And I'm going to skip forward just a little bit.
Many kind of emergency situations, because there's too great a
This
risk.
one works really
What's going
well.
on. All of that.
Because everyone else does? From your
Okay,
group?
so let me give you a little bit of background about this particular situation. What they wanted to do, so Philip Zimbardo is talking about this in the very beginning, and I skipped over that part, but basically what they wanted to see is, would people stay in a room that appeared to be on fire because other people would stay in this room? And what would you expect to see in this? Would you expect for them to say yes, that they would stay in this room, or no, that they would leave their room?
Yes.
They would stay?
Yes.
Most people would
But,
think
but
like
I
that.
cheated because I know about this one.
Okay, yeah. So who said no, that they would leave? Why?
I would hope that.
Danger.
Yeah, you would think so. Okay, so I'm going to show you just a little bit of this clip so that you can see what has taken place here.
Make you an outcast. But what would you do if you knew your group was entirely wrong? Would you, for example, sit in a burning room just because everyone else does? This hotel conference suite has been prepared for a focus group discussion on internet shopping. But all is not as it seems. We've been busy. The place is rigged with 4 hidden cameras and 6 concealed microphones. And psychology professor Dominic Abrams is watching from our control room, which we built in an adjoining suite.
Now it's just a question of sitting and waiting.
Right, so this is a questionnaire all about kind of shopping habits and everything. So just move that off your chair.
Our first participant is Mary Mizuno, a London student who thinks she's arrived early. What she doesn't know is that behind this door there's about to be a serious fire in the hotel kitchen, or at least the illusion of one, created by a smoke machine and some sound effects. What will she do?
She's now noticed the smoke and is concerned. At this point, she decides to investigate to find out what's going on. She's immediately taken responsibility for figuring out what to do.
Mary does the sensible thing and evacuates quickly. She even leaves her bag and coat.
As I've never been in a fire situation before, I tried to remember the kind of things that you're supposed to do, so I left my stuff and just went out.
But Mary was on her own. This time, we've planted 7 actors who were all in on the experiment. We've said to them, when you see the smoke, do nothing. Our second participant is Lauren Heffernan, also a student. What will she do?
In this situation, she'll be following a script. The script is partly written in her mind. It's a script which is borrowed from things like sitting exams. Most situations like this have some element of expected or scripted behaviour.
But what will happen to her script when we make a slightly unusual situation very unusual? Nothing to start with, so we get her attention. Now, how long before she dashes out of the room?
She's checking increasingly to see what the other people are thinking. But who can she appeal to? The answer is nobody. She turns to the norm of the group. Ignore the smoke. In a real fire, the people in this group would be in very serious danger by now.
I was looking for some sort of reaction from someone else, even just the slightest little thing, that they'd recognise that there was something, going on here, for me to kind of react on.
Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what has taken place in this video. They did this 12 times. And how many times do you think that people walked out of the room in a safe amount of time? Out of 12? Once. One time out of 12. And it was a male who was probably in his 40s who left the room. And he actually stayed in there much longer than he said he normally would have stayed. But he asked the people, he would go around and he would say, do y'all see this? Should we leave? Should we evacuate? Do you see this smoke? So he kept on asking them, and he didn't leave for many, many minutes. I think it was probably 7 minutes before he actually left. By that time period, he probably would have had some major issues going on. On average, most people stayed in this room around 20 minutes. 20 minutes. And you notice she was looking around for others to see if they were responding to this. And because they were not, she sat in here. As this interview goes on, this woman continues to say, well, I kept on looking around. I was just waiting for someone else to get up, and she didn't do that. Fires like this take place all the time, and there's actually another one that was an actual true story that took place where people went into a particular bar. They went in through one door, and then everyone was trying to get out of that one door, and nobody went around to the back. There was a door that was leading to the back, and people could have gotten out of that door that was at the back, but nobody thought about that because they follow everybody else. And this is not always the case, but it is something that takes place, and so I just wanted to share with you this video. If you are interested in watching the rest of it, you can go to YouTube and type in dangerous conformity and then watch the rest of this video. It's really interesting. We just don't have time to watch the rest of it. Okay, so this next area, and I like to be able to pull in somebody from outside to see if we can get someone to conform to this. So I have done this multiple times in my class. So Carissa was in my class in social psych, and she probably remembers doing this. Did the person that we pulled in, did they conform or did they not conform? Do you remember?
That girl argued about it for a good minute, but she didn't.
Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Solomon Ash's study. Basically what he said is we have a standard line here, and we look at the comparison lines here, and basically what we do is we try to see, will people conform and say that line 3 matches the standard line if everybody else in the group has done this? Well, nobody has walked in late for me to be able to use this person as a key here, but what we can do is we can see if there was anybody out in the hallway and see if we could get them to conform. I like to do this. It's really interesting to see the differences between bringing an outsider in and then having a group that has been together for a period of time and seeing how they respond to this. So typically when we use the group, so you have been in a group situation for almost right around a month right now. So by this time period, a lot of times if we have another person walk in, so let's say if we have someone walk in late, we will go ahead and see if we can get them to conform. So basically, we'll come back to this and we'll ask them this question. If not, maybe I can go grab somebody out in the hallway and see if we can get them to conform. You can obviously see that line 2 is the comparison line for the standard line. That's obvious. But I have had it happen in my class where we typically have 48 people in my social psych class. And what takes place is when someone walks in late, I will have already shown the class this, and I tell everybody to say line 3. And what they do is they all say line 3, and we try to convince this one person that it's line 3. What has taken place over time is someone has said, well, I forgot my glasses. I can't see. Maybe it is line 3. I'm sitting way at the back. I can't see that line. And I'm like, they've never worn glasses before. So I'm wondering if they're just using that as a way to be able to say why that they are choosing line 2. So Lindsay already had mentioned this about the bystander effect. So there are several studies that have been done with the bystander effect. So what is the bystander effect, those of you who've taken social psych? Yes,
that was actually the best example to use for the Kitty Genovese, but
Mhm.
basically, they've also done a lot of YouTube videos on it too, and it's basically everyone seeing a situation that happens, whether good or bad, and kind of judging the reaction of everyone else, but everyone's doing the same thing at the same time. So if no one's doing something proactive, they all just follow the crowd, and if no one's doing anything, no one does anything.
Right, and so if we are in a situation where it is a helping situation, someone needs help, if you are alone, you are more likely to go over and help than if you are with a crowd of people. Because people think, there's someone else in this room that's more capable than I am. Someone else has probably taken CPR or first aid, or someone else is going to take action so that I don't have to. The Kitty Genovese case basically was a murder that took place in New York City. And what happened was this murder took place in the wee hours of the night around 2 a.m. and it took place over a course of an hour and a half. And Kitty Genovese was asking and pleading for help from her neighbors and whatnot, which were in close proximity. 38 people reported that they heard her screaming for help. 38. That's a huge number. And so when this murder took place, people asked, why were people letting this go on for so long? How come no one called the police for an hour and a half? No one reported it. So why do you think that could be?
Wait, so the 38 people reported that they heard her screaming after the fact?
After the fact.
Okay.
So they went around and asked neighbors, like the police went around and asked people if they heard anything going on, and 38 people said that they did. Yes. So why would people not do that? Why would they not call?
Oh, someone else has already called the police. Why would
Exactly.
they bother them?
Yeah. Someone else has already called. What else? How about I don't want to get involved in this?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be involved in this particular case. Like, I don't have time to do this, or I don't want to do this.
I don't want to
But-
be murdered too.
Yeah, I could put myself in danger, of course. There's all these things that go on, but it happens over and over. This is not just the first case. This is just one of the most famous cases that is around. So the next case, 2011, a 2-year-old girl was hit by a car and no one stopped to help. So there's a video about this one, and it's hard to see right here, but this child is laying on the side of the road right here, and it took a long period of time for people to help this child. Why could you think that this could be the case?
It's not my responsibility.
It's not my responsibility. What else could be going on? What could people be thinking about this 2-year-old child that's laying on the ground?
They'll sue me.
Okay, so they'll sue me. What else? What's our script associated with this? What kinds of things do we see with 2-year-old children anyway?
Bad behavior.
Do what?
Bad behavior.
Bad behavior. Okay. So the child is laying on the ground, people walk by, and someone else has already walked by right in front of me. I might think, oh, this child is sitting here, laying here on the ground because they're having a temper tantrum. So this could be part of this. And these are just some of the cases that I have seen, but people have tried to redo these cases. They've tried to do this again. And what they have found is that people typically will think that there are certain things going on with this individual. So if someone is laying on the ground let's say that they were in Washington, D.C. and they were sitting on a step or laying on the ground beside of a building, what kinds of schemas do we have associated with that? What kinds of ideas do we think about this particular person that's laying on the ground? Homeless, or they're drunk, or something like that. So we just keep on walking by. And if we only have one person there, you're more likely to help than if we have a crowd walking by. Because if everybody else walked by, there's nothing wrong. Nothing's going on. Okay, next area, groupthink. And this occurs when people have if someone is part of a group situation, a lot of times they want that group to be cohesive and they want things to take place in that group. And so basically what happens is, basically what happens is when someone considers the facts realistically, groupthink is part of one of those areas where we want to maintain the group's cohesiveness and unanimity instead of worrying about what one person outside would think. And so that's part of some of the characteristics of groupthink, which I've got some of them listed out here. I'm not going to go through all of these here, but we could go over one. So stereotyping, members stereotype their enemies as weak, stupid, or unreasonable. And then the rationalization, that's another one that we should go over, which is members explain away warning signs and help others rationalize their decision. So I show you an example about a cult in just a little bit, and so you can kind of think about some of those things, how they would rationalize a particular situation. So group polarization is looking at taking somewhat of an extreme solution to look at riskier actions. If they're in a group, you're going to see several of these things taking place. So one, social facilitation. So this is the positive influence of others. When other people are watching us, what could be an example of something that it would be positive to have someone watching our behavior or our actions? What are you going to do better if you have someone watching you?
Be more polite.
Okay, yeah, be more polite. What else? Anything else that y'all can think of?
Competition.
Competition, yeah, exactly. So if you have someone watching you might do better because of that. Okay, social impairment. So the negative influence of others. So what they have found is if something is an easy task, it's better to have people watching you. If something is a difficult task, it's more difficult for the person if someone is watching them. And then social loafing is basically saying that one person or a group of individuals will do something less than they normally would if they were alone. So social loafing, I always like to think about tug of war. If you are pulling on a rope and it's just you and one other individual, then you're likely to give everything you've got. But if you have a group of people who are with you, then a lot of times you don't give every single thing you've got because you're like, I've got all of these other people in front of me. Why should I, try my hardest and pull on this rope as hard as I can? So let me give you an example of this because I have been guilty of this. I have done this myself with moving furniture. So my husband and my husband's brother will help us move furniture whenever we need to, if we need to move or whatever. And I have done this multiple times where I have said, okay, let me help you all with this furniture. And so my husband will get on this side and my brother-in-law will get on this side of the table and I'm in the middle. Okay, I barely carry anything at all. I literally could probably put my fingers under it and do the same amount as if I was holding it like this. It happens all the time because I'm like, they've got it all. I really don't even have to do anything, but I'm looking like I'm participating. So how many of y'all have done things like that? Okay, social. Okay, some of you, who in here is like a great mathematician?
Not that good.
When you look at this, do you see, do you feel nervous? Like if I called you up here to do this, would you be like, oh my goodness, that seems really scary?
Yes.
I know that I would. I'd be like, there's no way. I'm like basic math right here. So if we look at the idea of, go back to this thing, social impairment and social facilitation. If I have a difficult task, it's going to be a social impairment. It's going to be hard for me to do this task right here. But if I had something where I just put 4 plus 4 up here, it would be something that you'd be like, yes, I'll get up here and do it. No problem. In fact, I'll get up there and do it right now so that everybody can see that I am good at this particular problem. Okay, so compliance. So these are sales techniques that take place. And in fact, this happened to me yesterday. I went to Walmart, and at Walmart they had a man that was standing there at the checkout lines, and he was selling DirecTV. How many of y'all have experienced something like that at Walmart before? Okay, so he said, hey, come on over here. I've got a great deal for you. Do you use DirecTV? And I said, no, I do not. I use Dish Network. And he said, oh, well, is there a reason? Because do you have AT&T? And I said, yes. And he said, you can combine them together and you can save money. And so I have heard this pitch before. This has happened to me before. I've had these things take place. So during the FACE technique, basically they start out with a large commitment And they say, oh, it's going to cost you, it's just $200 just to get everything set up. And then you're like, oh no, $200 is way too expensive. I don't have that kind of money. And they're like, well, what if I gave you a one-time deal and today only $100 for you? Has anybody ever had anything like that happen? Has anybody ever had a Kirby salesman come to their door? Well, this happened to me all the time because my cousin sold Kirby, and she would say, hey, can my group of people who work for me come over and vacuum your floor just so that they can get some understanding about what it's like to work in sales? And I said, sure. And so I let them come over, and she would have them do the whole sales pitch with me. And they also make you feel guilty. That's another thing. So I had a young baby that was crawling around on the floor whenever all this was taking place. And this person came up to me and they said, wow, look at all this dirt all over your floor. And they pulled out all of these pads and put them all over my floor, and there was probably like 60 of them. And they were like, would you like for your baby to crawl around on this dirt floor? And I'm like, yes, I would. You know why? Because dirt is good for kids. They're like, now what do I do? To my cousin, who was the team leader. And she was like, keep on pulling those pads. Keep on doing some of those things. Okay, so low ball technique. Basically, they start out with something low, and then they move to something higher. So you make a commitment with a low ball technique. So they say, so if right now, if I gave this to you for $19.95, would I have your business? And you say, yes. So you've made a commitment by that point. And then they bring you in and they say, okay, it's only $19.95 for a short period of time, like maybe a month or something like that. And then they've got you for a higher commitment. How many of y'all have went to purchase a car before? And how many of y'all have had something like this happen where they're like, oh, we can get you into this. The payment will only be, what, $200? Because that's what you said you could afford. And then you get in there and they're like, it's no big deal. It's only $216. How many of y'all have had that happen? Because I know I have. And at this point in my life, I don't do that. I'm like, no, you said you could get it at $200. I would walk. And they say, for $16? You would walk for $16? Why do you think that they have you at that point? Why does it not matter that it's only $16 at that point?
Because you already invested an amount of time and effort to look for a vehicle.
Exactly.
And so it doesn't seem like a great leap to spend $16 every month.
Right, exactly.
For that whatever extra feature you're trying to sell you.
Exactly. And you've spent 3 hours in there at this point, and you're like, it's just $16. But sometimes $16 will put you over budget. And so now I tell them, like, no. And so a lot of times, the last car that I bought, which was a year ago, I said, I want you to know, when you go back there, it will not be over $300. If it is, I will leave. $1 over. $1 over. And he said, oh, if it's just $1. I said, no. And so I brought up this technique, and I said, I teach social psychology. I will not fall for that. And he was like, oh my gosh. So anyway, I got it exactly what I wanted.
I did that too with my laptop, but I came in wanting the Pro, and they convinced me for the cheaper Air. But then they went on and convinced me for the bigger, storage space.
Oh yeah, happens all the time. Okay, the foot in the door technique. The big difference between low ball technique and foot in the door technique is low ball, you have a commitment. You already have a commitment when you walk in. This foot in the door technique, they don't have a commitment, but it's the same thing. It starts out low, and then they move up to a higher commitment. Okay, so the next area is looking at cults. And if we look at conformity, that's a big thing. If anybody has ever heard of Heaven's Gate, you will hear a little bit about that in just a second. But has anybody heard about the Heaven's Gate cult? Yes, Carissa, you have, because you took my class. Okay, so a couple of you in here. So Heaven's Gate, basically they were really big on conformity. Everybody who was in that cult wore the same thing. They all had their hair cut the exact same way. They all had matching shoes. They all had like 8 similar things. So right before they had decided to take their own lives, then what took place was they had an outfit that they all wore together. They had a meal where they had everything the same, so they went out to eat. And then these individuals ended up taking their life, which is obviously not something that you see a lot in the media. That's not something that happens a lot, because most people do leave a cult. So does anybody know what type of people typically join cults on average?
Disenfranchised individuals.
Okay, yes. And what else? Dependent. Yes. What else? Young. They usually see young people who have kind of lost their way. They need something and they're looking for something. And so they bring them in and then they have them join this cult, and then these people feel like that this cult is kind of meeting some of those needs. Now, some of them are more like detrimental than others, of course, because obviously Heaven's Gate is one of those that the individuals who were in the cult ended up dying. But this is not always the case, so I don't want you to think that that is the way that it always happens. But you can go to this website. It's still available. It shows you and talks a little bit about what Heaven's Gate is. And it basically, when the Hellbach comet was coming through, they said that this was going to be the end of the world. And the leader, he said that basically what was taking place is that if you did not join him and recycle yourself, that's what he called it, recycling, then you would be part of this end of the world and you would not be able to go up to the next level, which is what he was claiming was taking place. So these individuals ended up taking their lives and joining him into the next level, or so they thought. And these people were secluded from their families. The families said that they had very little contact with them, and that's something that a cult typically does, is they set up something where people are not getting a lot of outside influence because they don't want that. So anyway, I just wanted to show you a little bit of things here. You can also watch videos from Heaven's Gate, and they've got a whole documentary basically trying to recruit people. They were saying, hey, come in, join our graduation ceremony. They called it graduation ceremony. They didn't call it something like join our suicide mission. Obviously, people would not be open to that. And so they changed the way that people thought about that inside of their cult anyway.
It's very much the same dynamics as gang membership.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely so.
I have a question.
Yes.
So is it like they know that they are looking for these specific characteristics, or is it more of like a, hey, you seem like you fit this, and they bring them in? Like the leader, would he like purposefully know all of that?
I think that they talk to individuals and they look for certain personality characteristics. Because if you talk to anybody for a period of time, you get an understanding, like a general understanding of what kind of person that person is. If you find out that they are very opinionated and very individualistic, then that's probably not someone that you want to bring into your cult. So obedience, there's quite a few things that are associated with obedience, but anyway, compliance is definitely one of them. And then authority. So does someone have the authority to be able to get you to comply? So it shows you a picture of a police officer requesting certain things. So how many of y'all have ever been pulled over at any point for speeding? Okay, if you are like me, which I have been, as soon as I get pulled over for speeding, I feel super nervous. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a ticket. And whenever the person comes up to me, I'm like, how are you? And I feel like I talk differently because I feel like this person is a person who's in power, and they're asking me for my driver's license and things like that. So that happens in other situations as well. So I'm going to show you in a little while about Milgram's study, and most of you have probably seen something about Milgram's study, and if you have not, I definitely recommend watching it. They've got an old Milgram study, and then they did a new one about 5 years ago, I want to say, so that they could see if this could be repeated. But anyway, how many of y'all have your sheets of paper that have your name and address and phone number on them? Okay, did anybody not put their name and address and phone number? Okay, so some of you know me in here, but some of you do not. And so you gave me your phone number and you gave me your address and your name, but nobody asked why. Why?
I thought about it in my head. I would take a figure.
You thought about it, but you were like, go ahead and do it. Okay?
Well, right now it's still in my hand and you don't have it. So.
I know. I could come around and pick them up. And I could have said, hey, pass those over. But I actually just want you to throw those away. Or I can take them and I can shred them. I'm not going to do anything with them. The reason why I ask this is I think that people can ask for things because I think I walked in and I asked you to do these things, and people will tend to give you almost anything that you ask for if they think that you are a person who is a person in authority. So we could ask for Social Security numbers because people have in the past. I don't want people to write their Social Security number down and me to have to worry about having that on a piece of paper. But I had my administrative assistant whenever I was teaching my social psych class, probably 2 or 3 years ago. I said, hey, can you go over to my class and ask them for their name, phone number, and student ID number and address? And she said, oh yeah, I'll do that. So she walked in and she said, hi, my name is so-and-so. I will need y'all to give me these following things. And so everybody did. Nobody asked any questions. And this person was someone that they may have seen. Maybe they saw her in the department. But wouldn't it be weird if someone just walked into your class randomly and asked you for all of these personal things and then you just to give them to them? Why would we do that? Yes?
I would assume that it fits a schema that we have, like, this is a classroom, there might be doing some kind of study,
Yeah.
might need information, or the
Exactly.
psych department might need info for something.
Right.
And so we kind of just take this, in your situation, just kind of force it into the
Right.
schema.
We do. We think, okay, well, this person obviously needs my information. Yeah.
And also like how we're raised too, because like with Caden, I'll tell him to do something and he'll ask me why, and I'm like, don't ask why, just do it. And I'm like, oh, I'm teaching him not to ask why. So-
Right. Exactly. But do y'all think that that's a little bit scary? I mean, some of y'all don't know me, and you gave me all of your personal information. I know where you live if I pick these up. So be aware that all of these things take place. When I teach the social psych class, my goal is to teach you about being proactive for yourself, like understanding some of these concepts and realizing that these happen over and over. This is something small, but we have seen that people do larger things than just giving your address or your phone number.
That's what phishing is all about,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Phishing scams from email.
Uh-huh.
They'll make it look like they're from IT, or they'll make it look
Exactly.
like they're from your bank or your credit card company, and they'll say you need to confirm your account, so send us your account information, and then
Uh-huh.
that's your account.
Yep. Exactly.
Copy and paste the clip art from the
It's been so
website.
easy for me to go into my mom's and my grandmother's information.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, I'm doing it with their permission, but I don't sound like a 70-year-old woman, and
Right.
they don't care.
Now, did you know that up until recently, I could walk into First Financial Bank, not have my driver's license, and get money out of my account? I can walk up there and I have the account number, I handed it to them, and they went ahead and, as long as I had the account number, but how many people can have access to your account number? I mean, yeah, it's kind of scary. Okay, so how many of y'all have seen Milgram's study? Okay, so those of you who have not, this is just a short clip on it. If you have not seen it, please watch that. It's something that you really should see by the time that you graduate, because you should have seen it in social psych if you took that. You should have also seen it in general psych if you took that. And if you haven't, I would definitely recommend watching this experiment.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram had also looked at how we respond to authority. In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Will you open those and tell me which of you was which, please? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game, and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud, horse, rock, house. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer, horse.
Experiment, that's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right ahead.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're gonna get a shot. 180 volts.
Ow! I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
can't stand it. I'm not gonna kill that man there. I mean, who's gonna take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next was slow. Walk, dance, truck, music.
Two-thirds of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I'm getting no answer. He was hollering on less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
So, I talk about the Nazis in my social psych class, and I always ask people, do you think that those individuals were just horrible people who just had no care for humanity at all? There were probably some people who were bad people, but on average, people will do things like this. Like I said, 2/3 of the time, you can see people doing things like this because they can blame it on somebody else. So if something happened to this individual, this man could say, well, you know what, it wasn't me, it was the person in the lab coat. So they also believe that that person is a person of authority. That person knows what they're doing. They can tell me how to react. And then if this person, like I said, has some kind of issue with that, we can always blame it on somebody else. And that's the same thing I feel like that took place during the time period of the Nazis as well. So notice here, 65% obeyed up until the end. Even after the person got upset, they still continued to do that. That man that you saw, he continued to do that even after that person quit speaking and quit yelling anymore. So it's kind of scary. And they just redid this. You can watch the new study that has been done. So you just type in the new Milgram study and you can watch that, and it takes place just the same way.
Then they replicated it 16 times, and they found no difference in gender. They found no difference in race. They found no difference. Like, it is pretty fully ingrained into your human psyche.
Crazy, huh? Mm-hmm. So this just shows you the sample script all the way up to 330 volts. I mean, can you imagine that? Like, continuing to do this? And if I ask people, I say, so do you think that you could do this? Almost everybody will say no. I think I would stop. And then over and over, we have proved that people will continue to do this. Okay, moving on to social cognition. So we have certain attitudes that we develop about a particular person. So they look at this bubble here, and it says she's such a nice person because she's waving, hello or goodbye to these people. So we have certain types of ideas. Have you ever heard of something called what is beautiful is good? So people have said that if someone appears to be a particular way, they look a particular way, then that person is a good person. So we see that in social psych. It happens a lot, that people believe that certain positive characteristics are associated with people who appear to look nice. But if we look at attitudes, we develop these attitudes after a relatively small amount of time. In fact, you just talk to a person for a short amount of time, you have made a particular judgment on them, and it tends to stick with you unless there are some major changes, of course. Okay, and then components of attitudes. So you've got cognition, things that you think about that person. So this gives you an example about music. So I think country music is better than any other music here. And then your affect, so I like country music, it's fun and uplifting, which we know that that can be false a lot of times. Behavior, so I buy music, MP3s that are of country music every chance that I get. So those are the attitudes that would show consistency between a particular thing like music, like me liking a particular type of music. Okay, and then attitude formation. So how do we actually form these particular attitudes? Well, direct contact is actually one of them. And usually I believe that we have certain things that take place within our family unit that create these particular attitudes. Direct instruction from others, and then interaction with others. So we form these attitudes based upon a variety of different events that take place in our life. And then, of course, vicarious learning. So what do we see others doing? And to give you an example about this, so if you have a fear of getting shots, like you go to the doctor and you have a fear of getting shots. Well, if you look at that, you can go through all of these things and you can develop a certain understanding of why someone would have an attitude similar to this. So vicarious learning, I want to just share with you on that one because this one's kind of an interesting one to look at. If someone comes in and they get a shot and then they walk out and they're crying and they're like, ow, then do you think that that could be something where another child is walking into that particular room and then they're already scared, they're already upset, and they've learned this vicariously because they have seen somebody else crying. I've seen this take place over and over with my own kids. If someone is scared, they're going to pick up some of these attitudes associated with that. Okay, persuasion. So I want to share with you all, I had someone who was standing, and I have a lot of stories from Walmart, but someone was selling some like popcorn from the Boy Scouts the other day, and I feel like I have so many fundraisers that I buy things from and whatnot, so I don't buy things like that. But I didn't want to be that horrible person that says no to the little boy who walks up and he says, hey, would you like to buy something from me? I've got this popcorn that I'm selling and it's for a really good cause. It's going to send me to camp. And I'm like, well, I don't have any cash right now, but what I'll do is maybe I'll grab some whenever I come back out. I am a horrible person. So I walked out on the garden side, way on the opposite side, because that little boy was still standing there. I was going to walk out on that main area where he was standing, and I saw him still standing there. Because sometimes by the time I walk out, somebody else new is taking their place. And so anyway, I walk out to the garden section and I walk all the way around and I make a huge circle around the Walmart parking lot so that I don't get persuaded into buying something, because I probably would on the way out, because if they hit me again, I probably will definitely do that. Especially if he walked up and he was like, you're the lady that was going to buy something whenever she came back out. Did you bring me your money? I would have been like, yes, I did.
Credit cards.
I know, I hate that.
I don't have any cash.
I'm like, oh man. I used to be able to say that. I don't have any cash, but now they're like, we have a credit card machine. It's attached to our credit card. Yes, exactly. How are you buying anything in Walmart? But if we look at persuasion can be a powerful tool. And I put up here Girl Scout cookies, but I just had this happen literally like 2 weeks ago with the Boy Scout, so I wanted to just go ahead and talk about that instead. But anyway, if you look at persuasion, changing someone's idea to another can be difficult. So I gave you an example of sales persuasion, but then we also have certain things that take place that are part of persuading us to believe a particular way, and that can be more difficult to do. There's a variety of things that are going to fall into that. Who the person is that's persuading you, what they're persuading you about, or is it something that you feel very strongly and passionately about? There's all kinds of things going on right now on social media about that, about things that people want someone to be persuaded on in one way or another. So you look at the source of the message itself, and then the target audience. Who are you trying to get to persuade? If you come in and you talk to college students and you want someone to be persuaded, would it be very beneficial for me to bring in someone who was 75 years old to talk to you about something? Well, it depends on what the topic is, of course, but would it be more beneficial for me to bring someone in who is a little bit younger because you would respond better to that person? And then you also have to look at, if I'm going to target a particular audience, I need to know that audience. I need to be able to connect with that audience. And so I need to do a variety of things with this audience to be able to change and persuade their opinions and thoughts. Okay, so there's two different routes of persuasion, the direct route and then the peripheral route. So the direct route would be if you actually were interested in a particular topic, you came because you wanted to. You came because it was a topic that was really important to you. So this, I believe it was earlier this month, there was a group discussion that was down in room 125 in the math building that was about suicide. How many of y'all heard about that? Okay, so I was like, oh, this is really interesting to me. I have a personal desire to go to things that talk about suicide because I worked with grief a lot. I have had my own family members who have done these things, and so the direct route would be something that you were actually interested in. I was actually interested in hearing that, so I went down there. The peripheral route would be there's other things that make me want to come. So Matthew McConaughey, for example, giving a particular speech. I would go to that because I think Matthew McConaughey is really cute. And so I might want to go to this just because of this. It doesn't involve the message. It's something else brought me in. All right, and I am almost out of time.
Okay.
So I want to also talk about something that I did with you with the bowl of candies. So I see, all right, a couple of things have taken place here. So the top three numbers I wrote on here, and I wrote them in different ink. And so you see 221, 215, 207. Shortly after that, a lot of people put in the upper 100s, some 200s, and then Kristen came in and wrote 60. And when she wrote 60, then everybody else started going down. Everybody else started saying 50, 65, 45, 76, 32.
Which I was going to put like 40, 45. And
Yeah.
then I saw your numbers and I was like, oh.
Okay, you did something that was great. You saw the numbers ahead of them and you said, wow. She actually said this. She said, oh my gosh, these are so big. And Kristen actually counted these for me last year whenever I did this. And basically what we do is we look to others whenever we're not sure. So we look up and we're like, okay, if I look at this and I see, okay, maybe there's 100 in here. And then I look at the numbers above and I see that most people have put 200 or 175. Maybe I need to up the number because maybe I'm wrong. And this happens a lot. So I did this myself even after knowing all of this. So there was a contest that was going on and it said, please write down the number of deliveries that this particular OBGYN had over the past like 10 years. And so I had a number in my head, and then I started looking at the numbers, and my numbers were way off. They were way lower. And then so I started thinking, okay, this person is probably, since they're in the Metroplex, I have no idea then. I'm thinking about Stephenville OBGYNs. So my number's wrong because of that. And so I justified it. And then I changed my number, and I increased my number quite a bit. And you know what? My original number would have been better than the number that I chose, because I started comparing myself to all of these other people. And we do that a lot. The actual number in here, I counted it this morning, is 105. So I overestimated at 221 whenever I did this to get y'all to go higher. And we do that a lot. So it only takes one person to change that. So we have one person who goes down to 60. By the way, you're the only person who had went down below 100. The smallest one before that was 108, which is pretty close to what it is. So person who got 108, yay, go you. Was that you? Yeah, so good job. So anyway, I will end there. So thoughts about these things so far? I mean, obviously we've got more to discuss, but you'll have to look at those things on your own. And I really suggest watching some of the videos that I discussed. They're really interesting. It will give you a better understanding about social psychology in general. But to me, it's really interesting to see what we actually do. So, questions? All right. Yes.
Have you ever seen this newer video about the Greek life? It was made by this girl called Victoria Valentine, and it was comparing like Greek life with a cult recruitment video.
No,
and it got viral for a bit.
I have not seen that.
I think it came out like maybe last semester from Syracuse University, and she went viral because of it.
Huh. I'll make a note of that. I'm always looking for new videos. All right. Well, y'all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, I'll follow up one last thing before we wrap up. We'll wrap up a little early today. So, when we were talking about cults, did anybody else, and I don't know if I asked this class or if I asked another class, did anybody else see through their Facebook feed all this stuff that came up about Leah Remini after she left the Scientology church? Anybody? It was the most bizarre thing. So I reported the ad on Facebook because it was clearly a smear campaign. Like, it was a individual character attack, and it was promoted, like it was a sponsored thing, post through Facebook. So basically, what it appears has happened is that she has left the Church of Science. Is anybody a Scientologist? I apologize if anybody's a Scientologist, but she left the Church of Scientology, and then she sort of stopped talking publicly about it. And so what has happened is now they've brought to bear the resources that they have to engage a smear campaign, and Facebook is complicit in it, because I've seen 2 advertisements come through my feed that are basically like, Leah Remini is a terrible person. I'm her dad and I had cancer and she turned her back on me. And yes, and then there was another one about her sister who needed help and she was a terrible person and she just let her, I don't know, rot, whatever. It's really interesting. So I think that, I think that this cult stuff is relevant to gangs, because I've done a lot of research on working with people in gangs. So very relevant for gangs, very relevant even now. And I feel like, and I've got on this soapbox a lot, and I've gotten on it in adjustment, I get on it in abnormal, but I feel like we are very right now, with technology and our access to technology, polarizing ourselves in ways that are artificial, but that really create some deep, deep division and blind us to the similarities that we all have. So it's sad, but we'll talk more about that after we get through the major field test, because there are some assignments related to that. So hope you have a great Monday, great week. On Wednesday, we're going to talk about building your surveys and any questions that you might have about other things related to your research project. So happy day.